does have an effect. I think that the fairness of that is very much better than the fairness we were grappling with here, where we all had a sense of, well, this is okay for people involved in activities and sports, but the rest of the population gets on stuff. They don't get it.
Any other questions from the committee, comments? Jerry?
I have some comments. I respect the fact that Cliff has put a lot of time into this, and his intent was to try to fix the problem, as he suggests, by increasing penalties, expanding the jurisdiction over students. But I disagree with everything he said, with all due respect.
But you
I
defend
respect
people who are in this situation.
Well,
so.
that may be true, but my philosophy is just different. I'm not sure that continuing increasing penalties is going to fix the problem. I still think we have to do a better job, and it may be something we have to sit down with the Youth at Risk Subcommittee and talk about as far as educating these kids about the dangers of alcohol and substance abuse and smoking and everything else. I think if you look at some of the statistics that John Bernard provided us with over the last 7 or 8 years, it's pretty consistent as to how many kids are involved in on-campus or in-school violations. So it hasn't changed very much. I think one of the things when you listen to Cliff and he makes his points about this, that he overlooks is there are other consequences. The philosophy that, well, then it's okay to bully outside of school or it's okay to drink and drive, that's not the case at all. There are consequences at home and there are consequences with law enforcement, severe consequences for any kid that's caught even in possession of alcohol or certainly driving a motor vehicle under the influence of alcohol. So there's a lot of other penalties that they have to deal with in addition to the school penalties. My position on this is to stay with the MIA guidelines regarding both the year-round jurisdiction and the penalties that they've imposed. I'm just not prepared to, I mean, the guilt by association I just think is unenforceable. And you talk about due process, I think it's totally lacking in due process, that by somebody being present when something's going on, that they're necessarily guilty of something. So I'd like to stay with the MIA guidelines and follow their recommendations.
Comments, anybody else? Michael? Karen?
Well, I don't want to be a precedent setter for anything, and I think actually Mike and I were talking about this at one point, where we really don't want to be getting into the realm of setting that precedent and being that test case. I think that would really detract from what we try to do as a district, which is to provide a supportive environment for prevention of these types of activities. I think penalties are just one piece of the equation, in fact a very small piece of how we prevent things like violations of chemical health policy from occurring. Looking at the statistics, I just want to read some of these for the camera. Alcohol-related infractions by school year, this was provided by Mr. John Bernard. In the high school, in the 03-04 calendar year, there was only one alcohol-related infraction. The highest was, from that point on to today, was 12 in 2005-06. And then this current school year, there were 7 alcohol-related infractions that were, the number of there were 7 students who were in possession of or under the influence of alcohol at school or at a school-sponsored activity.
I think that's key, Karen, too, because
Yeah.
so everybody understands that's at school-sponsored activities or at school. A lot of the events that we deal with are outside of school. A lot of the issues that we dealt with, and a lot of the frustrations we experienced last year were with students, and particularly athletes, who got involved with alcohol totally outside the realm of school. And I don't know what that number is, but it seemed like we were seeing more than that.
Well, a lot of the estimates that you can find from the youth behavior surveys that the state does, and you know, students will say that they've experimented with alcohol and other chemicals. We know this is going on, but we don't really understand, you know, what the problem is, the entire size of the problem. When we see events come up, it seems so acute that the problem might actually be bigger than it is. And I understand that the frequency of this past year seemed very high because it was just right after one thing after another, and then it stopped for a while, and that was the big topic. But I think in order to understand whether this is a real problem, we have to really, you know, ask our kids and our community, what's really happening here, and what could we do that would be of benefit? We already do a lot of educational activities, and as Mr. Bernard says in his memo to us, you know, he'd like to continue doing those types of educational programs. You know, I'm a public health person. To me, this is a public health problem that needs to be handled in a holistic fashion. That's just my philosophy and where I come from. But I also think that, you know, we're just one part of a child's day. And the people that they interact with during the day include the professionals at school, the kids that they're with, but also their families. And the families are a driving influence in a lot of this. So if you look in the literature, the home is really where a lot of this comes from. And that's not our province. As much as we play that role during the day, we cannot be enforcing anything that is outside of that. So the only thing that I potentially would support is having more education around this. Do I think that they need to take an online test with the MIAA? No. I find that really out there. I mean, you know, a kid taking an online course is like me taking a state ethics training. We all had to do this, as you remember, and, you know, okay, and some of the questions were, you're in violation of law, Mr. Venezia.
He doesn't have a computer though, so.
That's true. You don't have a computer. But we do have requirements like this, and we all kind of like, and I honestly don't think they're effective. The things I think are effective are community-based action that includes everyone in some way. And that, to me, is what we should be focusing our energies on, and trying to think of more creative ways to, as a school committee, assist our administrators and help them think of new ideas that are not punishments, but more of a collective action as a community.
And when you see those numbers, I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg. Any surveys that I've ever seen done, whether they were done in North Reading or done anywhere else, the percentage of kids that are dabbling in these types of at-risk behaviors, whether it's alcohol or drugs, are far higher than anything we see here. So, I mean, this is just those that are coming to the surface and that we're catching up with. There's a lot more, so I'm not sure. I think in these cases, what we're doing is we're punishing them, and I think we should punish them. I just don't agree with Cliff as to the extent that we should punish them. But I think this is punishment. I don't think this is any type of preventive medicine for the most part in dealing with these kids. Because they're out there doing it. It's just, these are the ones that have gotten caught, basically.
I guess I look at, and I don't want to come across as a cynic or somebody who doesn't care, but this is an age-old problem that I remember when I was a teenager. I'm sure you all remember when you were in high school. And I just see it as more of a societal issue. I look at how much time and effort John Bernard, the school committee, the Health and Wellness Subcommittee, Youth at Risk, how much effort North Reading Youth Services that gets put into this. And the thing you always have to remember is how the teenage brain works. And I've just finished reading, or doesn't work. And I just finished reading a book on it. And I'm not excusing this type of behavior. I'm just saying that you can put as much into this as humanly possible, and you're still going to have a lot of disappointments. Now, that doesn't really address the whole issue of how much of a penalty we put for different violations. But I think if society better handled and dealt with how it deals with alcohol and etc., then maybe a lot of our problems would lessen and maybe to some extent go away. And I just, again, not excusing any of this behavior, but I just wish society, the country as a whole, or got a better handle on these issues, and it would make it easier for us to handle also. As far as your policy, Cliff, most of the harsh penalties I don't agree with. I do agree with. I would like to, even though the principal, Mr. Bernard, was against this, I think we need a consistency in how coaches handle kids who are suspended from team play.
Absolutely.
I don't want to see some kids abolished, basically sent to Siberia, and other kids get to practice every day.
Is that your position on this too, Cliff? Then I do agree with you on something. All right.
You do agree.
I do agree with you on
that.
that. I agree with you on
You
that.
probably agree with me on more than that.
Yeah,
but at least for today.
The other thing I don't know about, and I've just started reading some studies on this, is how much a harsher penalty impacts the student. I think Cliff is right that going from 3 to 6 days is an important move by Mr. Brown, because that sends a message. That's saying you're missing 6 days. You do that twice, you're in serious trouble academically, in terms of you only have 4 more unexcused absences for the entire year.
But no, where I disagree is, okay, that's fine. But when the principal or anybody else suggests that they're laughing at us because we're only given a 3-day suspension, I think a 3-day suspension is a fairly serious consequence for anybody. I don't think anybody's laughing
But here's
at
why
us.
it isn't. No,
6 is twice as much.
No, here's why it isn't, Jerry. Because of the block schedule.
Yeah.
You're missing 2 days of one class and 1 day of another class. John didn't say they were laughing, but
I've heard him say
what
they
he
were
said
laughing
was the
at us,
parents
and I
would
don't
come
think
in and
that's
say,
true.
this is the penalty, 3 days, and the students were saying, I think John said the same thing, the students saying, only 3 days, this is the penalty?
Blow it off.
Right, they blow it off, it's not significant. So I do think, I support that doubling of that penalty. What I would like to see is, and we're still gonna have disagreement, is Mr. Bowers come back with a revision at our next meeting that we can, I don't know if we can do a first reading, because the first policy is going to be, that Cliff brought is gonna be significantly changed from the second one. So, if you could come back with something, if the committee is in agreement that he comes back with something at the next meeting, and then we review it, and then move from there, I think that'd be best. The other thing.
I agree with you, Mr. Webster, about, I wish that society was different.
Right.
But the reason why we have penalties is because society isn't
It's what it
going
is.
to deal with it. They're
Right.
going to be transitions that are beyond exceedances that run beyond. And for those, we have penalties, and we have laws and rules, and those are a part of what helps to get our society to function differently. And you can argue all you want about, how severe, but the example that Mr. Venezia and I keep using is the situation in Saudi Arabia, where, you could leave a bucket of money on the sidewalk in Riyadh and come back 3 years from now, it'd still be sitting right there, because everybody likes their hands, and so as a result, they.
Now Cliff's an Islamic fundamentalist.
Isn't it the same country where
Reality
you
is
can,
reality,
if you hold
and-
hands with your boyfriend, you're in jail for 6 years. I mean, it's the same kind of concept. It's, make it really severe, off with their heads, and sure, people are gonna be deterred. But
You
does
only
it
have
fix
to
the
do it
problem?
once, and right off, everybody around catches on to the situation, and they, stop doing that.
I'm sorry, I caught
No,
off.
it's okay. I just am wondering why are we writing this policy if it's already in the handbook?
Well,
Because we're gonna have to go back and rechange whatever's in the handbook at that point.
it may be, I don't know if it's too late to change this year's. I think Mr. Bernard said he had to go to print by mid-July. I think one of the reasons we were looking at it was, one, to make a consistent policy of how coaches treated
So why can't we add
students who
that
were
to
suspended.
the handbook?
But
We've already approved the handbook, and that would, well, if there's a significant
an
change in
amendment.
You could
policy,
amend
Yeah.
then we would have to.
Yeah.
Do an amendment.
What I'd like to see, though, is,
It sounds like we're following the MIAA and whatever
Yeah.
laws we're following. It doesn't seem like there's any reason to really rewrite quite a separate policy.
I'd just like to see, since Mr. Bowers started down this road, I'd like to see him come with something else, and either we adopt that policy, or maybe we take things from it and use them as amendments, incorporate them as amendments to the handbook. So
We have
that's
to deal with that treatment issue too. I don't think that word treatment should.
No, but I do think the education,
I think it's a good idea.
I think that's a good idea.
I don't,
I did want to.
Not with the MIA, I think
Right.
maybe we set up some type of
no,
an
I
education.
don't think it's effective. I mean, education is a very general word, and that's what
Well,
we do.
we need to become
you know,
more
it-
specific.
Well, we can be very specific. I just wanna, make sure that when we're mandating education, we're just not mandating into a hole in the ground that, has no meaning. There has to be something that our administrators feel that works.
Yeah,
and,
Right,
and
we'd
I
have to
think
go
it
through
should be
administration.
in-house.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. I don't think an online class.
No, I think it should be in-house.
Well, it sounds to me like we've got MIAA is gonna do it, and if we wanna be consistent, we're going, with them and play in the league, we're going to need to be
We'll have to
consistent
enforce it,
and
right.
adopt
Yeah,
that piece.
but I'm
Is that
saying
gonna,
maybe.
that might be an option, is that gonna be an option,
Maybe something
do you know,
beyond
or
that,
they?
so.
Well, it hasn't
Hasn't
been implemented yet, but if it goes in the way Mr. Gann explained it to me, it's not an option.
What is our input to MIAA? How do we have input to MIAA?
Well, there are John and Dave Johnson are members of the regional,
Right.
and the regional goes, and there's a representative from the regional that goes to the MIAA, and I don't know if North Reading is represented on any of their standing committees. I think they are. It's, it's kind of
So
lateral.
just to get in contact with whomever is on a
Yes,
specific committee,
right.
and if it's nobody from North Reading, just probably contact the
Yeah,
chair of the committee or whatever.
Yeah,